Detroit emerges from bankruptcy while Hillary Clinton's State Department files haven't been released. Plus, it's Flashback Friday. That's Flashback Friday, Cruiser, not Flash Friday. Put your shirt back on. Yep. All these stories and more coming up on The Rundown.
All right, stand by. 10 seconds.
Ready, camera.
Record.
3, 2, 1.
Record.
Thanks so much for joining us. This is The Rundown, where we run down some of the big stories making headlines. I'm your host, John Phillips. Joining us from Washington, D.C. is PJTV contributor Michelle Fields. And sitting right next to me here in sunny Los Angeles, although that's a lie, it's pretty overcast today, stand-up comic Stephen Cruiser. Now it's time to go to the top of The Rundown. And we begin with Mr. Cruiser.
At the top of my rundown, Detroit's bankruptcy is officially over. Michigan's Governor Rick Snyder said the largest municipal bankruptcy in history ended on Thursday. Thousands of homes were foreclosed and abandoned in the city as residents moved away. Just 1 month ago, a judge approved a plan for the city to exit bankruptcy. That plan calls for getting rid of $7 billion in debt, investing $1 billion in city services, and borrowing hundreds of millions of dollars to implement the plan. You may recall that Detroit filed for bankruptcy back in July of last year. And you may recall, John, that when they filed for bankruptcy and Rick Snyder appointed an emergency city manager and took powers away from the city council, he was called a racist for doing so.
Sure.
They never did quite adequately explain how putting a black man in charge of Detroit was racist, but they said it was racist. And this was mostly the speculation, as it turned out to be true, was because the city council just wanted a federal bailout. That was the route they wanted to go. How much, ballpark, what do you think that Rick Snyder just saved the American taxpayer?
Oh, look, it's immeasurable, but the unfunded pension liabilities still have to
Yes.
end, and they go beyond Detroit. We have a problem with them in Los Angeles. We have a problem with them in the state of California. Other cities, other states are doing the same thing. The thing that Detroit teaches us is the danger that is out there if there is a one-party city or a one-party state and you don't have another party there to keep them honest. And Democrats are particularly problematic when it comes to this because there is zero difference between the Democratic Party and the public employee unions.
Yep.
And when the unions are negotiating with themselves, you end up with that city and those images that you just saw.
Exactly. The California Teachers Association controls the Democratic Party in California. Michelle, power now goes back to the Detroit's mayor and city council. And, some of the players are different now, but it's the same, as John said, same party, same governmental entity that got them into this position. Do you think, this is pure speculation, but I'm curious, do you think that the people of Detroit will actually make some sort of political change in the near future now, or do you think this is just going to go back to being a problem in a hurry?
I'm skeptical and pessimistic. I don't know if they're going to learn their lesson. You would think that cities like Detroit, cities like Chicago and Los Angeles would see what happened in Detroit and realize, oh no, we are headed down that path. We don't want to go there and change what's going on in their cities, and they haven't. So I'm not sure that the people in Detroit are going to suddenly wake up and realize that they want something completely different. But it is a good thing that you have people like Rand Paul going down there talking about the economic freedom zones, and I think more Republicans should go out there and talk about economic freedom, because maybe it's just the fact that they don't have anyone down there. It's controlled by the Democratic Party, and there aren't huge Republican leaders going to Detroit talking to everyday citizens.
You know, the city of New Orleans lost a lot of population after Hurricane Katrina,
Yes.
which was blamed on the Bush administration, and still to this
Bush-Cheney
day.
weather machine.
That's
Yes.
right. The city of Detroit has seen a mass exodus of its population. And there wasn't a natural disaster. There was no hurricane. There was no tornado. It was just bad liberal government. Bad liberal government pushes people out of a city the same way that a hurricane did.
Extraordinarily corrupt liberal government, too. This Kevin Orr, the emergency city manager, it's Person of the Year time for Time Magazine right now, and they're always looking at fluffy, stupid people. This guy did an amazing job. He went in an untenable position. Nobody wanted him there. He took power from people, and then he got a plan. He pitched a plan to Detroit's creditors that none of them wanted. And in a year and a half, he's managed to sell them on the plan and get the city emerging from bankruptcy. He did an extraordinary job in the amount of time that he said he would do it. When was the last time that happened with anything involving the government? Did it when he said he would do it. As soon as it was done, he turned the power back over to them. He's my man of the year right now.
There you go. All right, Michelle, what do you have for us?
At the top of my rundown, the State Department has refused to turn over government documents from Hillary Clinton's time as Secretary of State. The documents were requested under the U.S. Freedom of Information Act. The requests have been pending for years. The agency has repeatedly missed deadlines to submit those documents. The State Department denied requests by the Associated Press because of the likely prospect that Hillary Clinton would be running for office for president in 2016. John, how is this okay? Don't you think that the documents should be out there? Isn't this a good thing? If she's planning on running for president, shouldn't the American people know as much as possible about her record and her time as Secretary of State?
Well, this family has more baggage than Southwest Airlines. This is just one part of the baggage that Hillary Clinton brings to the table. I mean, look at what happened with the Rose Law Firm back in Arkansas when the Clintons were initially making their run for the presidency in 1992. How long did it take us to get those documents? Ken Starr had to work for years and years and years to try to figure out what was going on in a variety of Clinton scandals. So they're secretive by nature. But this is the problem that she's going to face when she runs for president. There is so much, not just for Republicans, but she's got to get out of the primary first. There is so much for other opponents, for Democrats in the primary, to go through and to put out there. By the time this thing gets to the general election, if she's their nominee, she's going to be so badly flawed that I really can't see her winning a November election. I don't know if do you agree, Cruiser?
Well, I think that if the information all gets out there, yes, I agree with you, but you have to wonder how complicit the media will be in stalling. You've seen what they've been able to do with the Obama administration or with Obama's campaigns through 2 elections, how they can put off bad news, how they can delay things, how they can ignore things, and they don't become news until after the election. And I'm worried that they might at one point decide to rally around Hillary and do that. And the Freedom of Information Act right now is really frustrating me. It should be renamed the Freedom to Request Information Act, because that's pretty much all it is. And the government can stall forever on these things right now. That needs to be tweaked if there's going to be any real transparency. I'm all for the government working in a glass house, except for the people who are doing national security stuff. I mean a real glass house. I want to watch the people that we're employing work from now on. But yeah, I think if we actually can, if one Democrat can push the media to cover things like this, yes. But I wonder if they'll rally around.
Here's why I think they ultimately will, because so much of what goes on in the mainstream media is political. They lean to the left. 90+% of them end up voting for the Democrat every time there's a presidential election. You take Fox out of the picture and the Wall Street Journal out of the picture, it's probably 100%. But the personal does play a significant role in this. And Hillary Clinton has the same problem that Barack Obama has. She is not likable. The press corps does not like these two on a personal level. Politically, yes. Personally, no. Ann Compton is a friend of mine. She was the White House correspondent for ABC News. We've been colleagues for going on 10 years now over at the radio side. And she recently did an interview with C-SPAN where she said that on numerous occasions the president would curse out the press corps. I mean, literally, like a Red Fox album, the 4-letter words directed at them. People that he knows agree with him politically. People that he know have helped him out any number of times throughout the years in spinning stories certain ways. And he still treated them that way. Yeah. Hillary Clinton is known for having that kind of personal touch. Look at how she treats the Secret Service around her, all those stories that we've heard about. She treats the press the same way. She thinks that they are there to work for her. And after a certain point, even an abused spouse says no more. And
well, she has the Clinton camp will often play the "don't treat her like this, she's a girl" card too. They'll do that all the time. If they're being mean, you can't do this. She's a woman. Don't play that card. And on the likability scale, I would say that President Obama is Captain Kangaroo compared to Hillary Clinton. She's infinitely less likable. She's a horrible human being. Horrible human being.
All right, moving on to the top of my rundown. Donors are having to make some tough decisions on a potential Republican presidential candidate. Those who may run for the White House in 2016 are competing for wealthy backers. In Florida, for example, allies of former Governor Jeb Bush and Senator Marco Rubio were fighting over the same fat cats. It's the same scene in Texas, where donors are feeling squeezed by Bush, Governor Rick Perry, and Senator Ted Cruz. Perry and Cruz are also going after the backing of wealthy evangelical Christians. Many top donors have committed to being non-committal. And Cruiser, this leads to a discussion that we've had any number of times here on PJTV, which is that Republican donors are going to play it differently this time than they did in 2008 and 2012, where they all got behind different people, and we had a very long primary process that left our nominee bloodied and ripe for the pickings. When the Democrats, especially in 2012, didn't have a primary, Barack Obama ran unopposed. It seems to me that this time around, the Sheldon Adelsons of the world, or the Koch brothers of the world, they're going to wait and they're going to see who's doing well in the polls, who seems to be the consensus nominee, and then put all the chips on that guy and just drive everyone else out of the process.
We can hope that's the way it's going to go. Thus far, it seems like it's going to play out like that. There's also a lot to be said for political networks, long-standing political networks, and nobody has one of those like the Bushes have one of those in this story right now. I mean, you know, when you're the guy running and you've got two ex-presidents in your family and their money-making machines there's, you know, that cannot be discounted at all. That kind of old money can come into play a lot easier. That's the only reason anybody talks about Jeb. In the real world right now, people would say Jeb Bush, and we'd all go, because it's an idiotic notion, but he gets talked about because there's enough money through his brother and father to keep him in play right now. But I hope your scenario is right. I hope somebody backs off and the primary system is people have to go out and hustle for their own money for a while.
Michelle, if the donors end up doing this, is this creating a perfect storm for Mitt Romney to jump back in the picture?
Oh, I think so. And I think that he probably will. I think he'll let the primary play out for a little bit and hope that there's no one who's really rising above everyone else. And that would be his time to jump in and say, look, there isn't anyone that people are really getting excited about. Let me go in there and see what I can do and whether people like me. But I do think this is a good thing in the sense that donors aren't immediately throwing their money at one person. Instead, they're letting them all duke it out with one another and seeing what the American people like and who they like. But the problem with this is when you have a really long primary with a lot of people who are duking it out and doing a lot of oppo research, is our candidates come out and they go to the general election and they're weak. They have tons of baggage that has been thrown out there and their skeletons are there, and they've done all the oppo research for the Democrats. So there are pros and cons to the situation.
All right, now it's time to move on to Flashback Friday. And Michelle, you're up first.
All right, it was back in 1901 when the first Nobel Prize was awarded. The prize was handed out in Sweden on the 5th anniversary of the death of Alfred Nobel. He invented dynamite and other explosives.
Boom.
All right, Cruiser, what do you have?
On this Flashback Friday, it was back in 1800 on this date when a sleepy little place called Washington, D.C. was officially established as the capital of the United States of America. The site along the banks of the Potomac River was handpicked by George Washington. There had been something passed, a resolution passed a few years earlier to make it the official site, but this is kind of when it opened for business, and that was probably the last innocent day that little patch of land has known. It is now pretty much just second in evil only to the United Nations. But yay, architecture.
Are you a fan of Washington, D.C.?
The history, I love that. The architecture, the history, I love being there. I love going to the National Gallery. I love seeing the stuff. I love seeing the wheels of government turning. But you got to admit, I don't want to drive there, though. Driving there, it's the worst city in America to drive in. It was built for horses, and now it's, overrun by horses' asses. So.
Now, Michelle, you're a California girl. Was that a difficult transition moving out there?
Oh, it certainly was. I think the weather and being away from my family is probably the worst part. The city's kind of fun, though. It's a young town. There's always something going on, and there are interesting people. So it's not as bad as everyone says it is, but it's DC.
Well, my Flashback Friday involves a date that happened 14 years ago, when the United States Supreme Court settled the dispute surrounding the 2000 presidential election. This is when the election saw the hanging Chad fiasco. In a recount in Florida, Katherine Harris jumped to the national spotlight, and what a crazy time that was.
And inspired a legion of progressive loons who to this day still insist that no matter what the math was, Al Gore won that election. But, they need something to hang their hats on. We're all going to melt next week, too. The polarized caps are supposed to be gone by now, too, according to President Gore. So.
All right, that's going to do it for today's show. What do you think about Detroit emerging from bankruptcy? Make sure to leave your comments in the comment section below. I'm John Phillips. For Stephen Cruiser joining me here in Los Angeles, Michelle Fields in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for watching The Rundown.